Welcome to the Design of, a series where I analyze how design choices in video games express a full narrative through gameplay, sound design, and character design. Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite games of all time, Final Fantasy VII. I'll be talking about the original, Crisis Core, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but I'll give a huge section of spoiler warning for the latter because I know a lot of people haven't played it yet. With the massive advancement of technology due to the transition from the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation 1, the developers of Final Fantasy VII were finally able to expand their storytelling through minor attention to detail to further explore the game's themes and narrative. Characters can now express a variety of body expressions that were hand animated by the character designer Tetsuya Nomura himself in order to fully express his vision of the characters. What could be conveyed through a few frames of pixels a few years prior can now be fully expressed through 3D animation. Some characters such as Beer were animated with large, expressive motions to evoke their large personalities, while other characters such as Tifa and Aerith have quieter, more playful animations. Even through the gameplay and menus alone, we're able to see how the developers implemented creative ways to use the mechanics of Final Fantasy VII and the new power of the PlayStation 1 to further convey its themes and narrative. For example, during the Nibelheim flashback when Sephiroth joins your party, if you look at his equipment, you can plainly see just how much stronger he is compared to a younger Cloud and even your modern party. He's fully decked out with in-game materia the player hasn't even seen yet and is able to one-shot any enemies you come across. It's one thing to signal to a player how strong an enemy is through a cutscene, but there's a completely different level to literally showing the player by letting them compare the two themselves through gameplay alone. Playing with Sephiroth gives the player a temporary comfort and empathy, but most importantly, it covers the player in a lingering sense of dread. This gameplay sequence alone brings up so many important in-game questions. If he was this strong all these years ago, how strong is he in the present where I have to face him? Why is Cloud level 7 in this mission but still level 7 at the start of the game? What did he do between now and then to gain so few levels? And what did Sephiroth do to gain that many levels? And where did Sephiroth go wrong if he's cool with us in the flashback? What happened to him? Another gameplay detail that a lot of people might look over in this scene is that Cloud only has one materia equipped during this flashback. During the Nibelheim flashback, the reason that Cloud is able to backstab Sephiroth without him noticing is due to him having preemptive strike materia equipped. This materia allows you to ambush the back of an enemy, which is exactly what happens in this scene. The core theme of Final Fantasy VII is dealing with loss and the emotions that come with it. Because of this heavy narrative focus, the developers went to great lengths to ensure that the player could resonate with the party they're controlling by designing the entire gameplay system around said theme. The limit break mechanic is an extension of Final Fantasy VI's desperation mechanic. In that game, although every party member had a distinct gameplay mechanic and equipment, it was easy for the characters to become homogenized due to how easy it was to just use magic. Which also makes sense from a gameplay and lore standpoint because magic is so powerful and rare in that universe. With Final Fantasy VII's materia system being even more streamlined, it was important for the developers to emphasize each character's individuality through their unique limit breaks and animations, which was great as they had more room for character expressions and creativity due to the jump to 3D hardware. In Final Fantasy VII, the rate that your limit gauge fills is based on the amount of damage you take, reflecting the pain and frustration your character feels. The rate that individual characters build their limit varies, reflecting how quick characters are to break under their own emotions. Barret gains his the quickest due to him being a hothead, while Tifa gains hers the slowest due to her having a more patient personality. Limit break gain can be modified in FF7 through two statuses called Sadness and Fury. Sadness allows the character to take 30% less damage from attacks while having the limit gauge of the user, while Fury does the opposite, enraging the user. It's important to note that these two statuses to this day are completely unique to Final Fantasy VII. As I said before, emotion is the core theme of this story, and the developers went so far as to convey said theme through something as minor as status effects. Level 4 limit breaks were unlocked through a personal breakthrough in each of the party members' character arc, further contributing to this theming. Tifa's is learned after saving Cloud in the third act, Vince's after following his ties with Shinra, and Yuffie's after conquering her Wutai side quest. Core gameplay elements being tied to the narrative is what makes Final Fantasy VII's storytelling so special. Final Fantasy VII's biggest emotional hook in losing Aerith as a party member in itself is one of the most iconic and gut-wrenching losses in all of gaming, and for good reason. While Final Fantasy VII wasn't the first game, let alone Square game, to kill off a major party member, this was one of the first games that embedded it into the core of the story and stood on its decision to do so. There is no bringing Aerith back once she dies. The players and the character have to cope with losing her throughout the remainder of the game. In modern games, you can usually tell when a playable character is going to die, whether it's due to their inventory being uneditable or a point of no return pop-up. Final Fantasy VII took a great risk in not telegraphing this to the player, which is reflective of how we navigate death in real life. We unfortunately never know when this is going to happen, and I appreciate the writers for sticking with their vision. The reason that Aerith's death leaves such an impact on the player to this day isn't because of just the great music and the great soundtrack, it's largely done in part through gameplay. Aerith is one of the strongest party members in the game, and her utility alone is enough to make her a must pick on any team. On a first blind playthrough, she's the only true healer and caster role in the party. Early on, her limit breaks make her one of the few ways to cure, heal, revive, restore limit gauge, and even make the whole team invulnerable. And if you build her up, losing her is like literally losing half the party. When she's gone, your team literally has a gap in its composition, with the PHS screen forever having a blank space where her icon used to be. Also, another fun but kind of morbid fact, the ribbon accessory that Aerith wears protects her against every single status in the game except for slow, stop, and instant death, which is very unfortunate, but also contributes to my point. Crisis Core's Digital Mind Wave, or DMV mechanic, takes the thematic and mechanical focus of emotion throughout Final Fantasy VII and turns it into a Crisis Core mechanic of the entire game. I'm so sorry I had to do that. Since DMW is functionally a visual and mechanical reimagining of the limit break from the original, it serves as a representation of Zack's emotional state while in battle. According to the Crisis Core website, soldier members are taught to call upon their past experiences in battle to heighten their strength and improve their skills further, so the strength of Zack's DMW is affected by his relationship with whoever he rolls on, allowing him to level up and use their abilities in battle. The person that Zack's thinking of appears on the roulette, and what memories is recalled changes depending on the situation. For example, when Zack fights anyone related to Soldier, he usually recalls the memories of Angio who was close to him. The implementation of this mechanic to tell Zack's personal story and convey the way that he was trained as a soldier is interesting and unique, especially in the way that it is utilized in the final chapters of the game. Seeing this mechanic we've been familiarized with for the past 15 hours or so go berserk and fade away in the ending makes it hit that much harder. Now, as I promised, here's your big spoiler warning for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I will be spoiling the ending of the game and that only, so if you don't want to see it, I'm gonna give you like 10 seconds. Otherwise, you can skip to the last part of the video here. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth uses the fact that it's a beloved video game with an unreliable narrator in order to completely subvert and muddle every player's expectations on the story. Whether they're a new or old fan, everyone is going to get crossed up here until they pay attention to the details. The writers were able to take details and elements fans know by heart from the original, subvert them, and then fully embed them back into its gameplay in order to subtly expose future plot points. Most of this is done within the game's final chapters, which I will again be spoiling if you haven't left at this point. For example, while everyone else gains their limit break at the start of the battle after Aerith dies, Cloud is the only one to not get his limit break. This is because he's delusional and believes that Aerith is still alive and well. Even during Aerith's death scene, the way that the shots are composed from Cloud's point of view makes it ambiguous at first, but undeniable upon a rewatch. Just look at how everyone else in the party reacts to anything that Cloud sees after this event. They look mortified. The composition is toying with the audience the same way that Sephiroth is toying with Cloud. We also see this storytelling through gameplay in the Jenova fight at the end of the game. Jenova has an attack that's called Mourning Wail, which knocks the entire party away from her, but Cloud's the only one that's immune to it because he's not mourning Aerith. He fully believes that she's alive, so there's nothing to mourn, rendering the attack ineffective. It's also worth noting that this version of Jenova used to be called Jenova Life, but is now called Jenova Life Klinger, as if Cloud is clinging on to the fact that Aerith could still be alive. When the party goes back to Nibelheim, Cloud can climb on top of the water tower to reminisce with Aerith, and he takes his sword off his back here and puts it down in order to sit with her. But in the flashback, Cloud sits on the water tower with his sword still on his back, which is physically impossible, exposing his false memories of visiting the reactor with Sephiroth. Even the ending CG rendered cutscene shows that Cloud is an unreliable and delusional narrator. Aerith at this point only exists and reacts to elements of the world such as the wind when Cloud is looking at her. We can see this when the entire party but Cloud is under the tiny Bronco and a huge gust of wind hits everyone but Aerith. Later when the party leaves, we see her hair blowing in the wind because Cloud is actually watching her here. Even within the ending credits of the game, which are shown from Cloud's perspective, we can see that Cloud has mentally blocked out any scenes involving the party after Aerith's death. There are huge gaps missing between the Jenova fight, the final boss, and the CG ending of the game. It almost skips the entire last 2 hours of the game. It's elements like this that make me even more excited for the finale of the remake trilogy, because you can tell the developers really understand what made the original great through these subtle thematic and gameplay details. Overall, the storytelling through gameplay throughout the Final Fantasy VII compilation is something that I want to see way more of in video games. As an interactive medium, being able to place the player directly in the role of the character through a combination of subtle gameplay elements, music, and shot composition is vital to telling stories unique to video games, and I hope the developers continue to implement these techniques in the future. Let me know if there's any details that I missed, because I'm sure there's a ton of them that I missed at this point, and thanks for watching.